Susan Ubalodi. I'm on the faculty here in the Department of Architecture, and it is my great pleasure to introduce tonight's lecturer, Benedetta Tagliabue. I first met Benedetta when she and Enrique Marias came to University of California, San Diego to teach our Option 1 students, a 3-week section, I think it was. I've thought in many times how lucky those students were to have their sort of undivided attention for 3 weeks to do a project, talk and learn about design. Almost totally undivided. I know that Enrique and Benedetta also were very interested in acquiring the latest Macintosh computer that was available in 1992 in order to take back to their practice in Spain. So that was shortly after she joined the studio with Enrique Marias in 1991. And she then progressed on to become partner and also wife. And going back a little bit, Benedetta was born in Milan and graduated from the University of Venice. She's Italian in 1989. Her work with Marias includes a number of high-profile buildings that we constantly show to our students. Can you please do some drawings like this? Can you please think about your roof this way? Can you please understand the landscape the way that this project has taken it on? They are projects that are ubiquitous in architecture teaching throughout the world. In 1998, the partnership won the competition to do the Scottish Parliament building, which was finished under Benedetta's leadership in the studio in 2004 and went on to win many awards. After Enrique's death in 2000, she, I would say, reconfirmed the studio, gathered up the reins, figured out how to move on, and since then the studio has done very interesting projects throughout Europe, and they're working also in China. They have a piece on their website. I want to talk about the website just a little bit. They have a very nice piece on the website that talks about how they work with architectural projects, open spaces, urbanism, rehabilitation, and exhibitions, trying to conserve the spirit of the Spanish and Italian artisanal architectural studio tradition, which does not aim for specificity. And I assume that means in building type as well as scale and location. And you can see that in the work. If you visit the studio website, which is Marias Tagliabue EMBT, you can virtually arrive at the studio by clicking on Visit the Studio, and it takes you through a series of photographs, through the door, up the stairs, into the studio, through the various rooms, until you see people working. And then there's a day in the studio, which is a time-lapse of a day in the studio, where everybody's working really hard. What's interesting about these is that they give you a flavor of not just the people and the place, but also the work that they do, which is an overlayering of the past and the future and sort of a series of provocations in the present. And they all fit very comfortably together and yet have that hook that catches your eye and catches your mind as you visit the projects. I asked Benedetta whether she had 2 watches, because the last time I saw her, not quite the last time, but we worked together in 2001 on a competition in Los Angeles for the Caltrans building that Morphosis won. We came in second, very painfully, and at that point, air travel was really tough. It was right after the Trade Center had come down. And Benedetta arrived one day with 2 watches, one for her children and one for the appointments in Los Angeles, and a plastic bag full of little tiny spheres of bubble wrap. And in each sphere of bubble wrap was this exquisite wooden model of a concept design for this 800,000 square foot building. And each model was 3 inches by 3 inches of freeways coming and colliding and forming into a building mass. And there were 20 at least. And she unwrapped them and spread them out on the table. And this was a design build project. So we had the elevator guys, we had the curtain wall guys, we had the concrete and steel people, and the executive architects. And as everybody sort of hunched over these tiny little beautiful concept models, each discipline started saying, how many linear feet of curtain wall do we have in this scheme as compared to this scheme, as compared to this scheme? Does this one take 8 elevators or 12 elevators? And that was the insanity of the project that we were working on. So, with great pleasure that she's here and able to talk about her new work, I give you Benedetta Tagliabue.
So is there a microphone on that? It's okay, perfect. So I'm very impressed by this presentation, really fantastic. You made me think about things which I thought were belonging to another life. Last time I came in front of Morphosis building and I remember this story of Caltrans competition as if it was so far away, so long ago. Well, maybe it was not so long ago. It was a story which was so important for the development of the many projects during this last 10 or 12 years. So I think in these last years, one of the projects of the past which I remember and which I like to talk about is this one, the project of a market in Barcelona called a conversation tonight a little about this theme, which I never really talked directly. I think yesterday I had a wonderful conversation with a young architect here in San Francisco, and we were commenting about the difference of working, for example, when I was working on the Scottish Parliament or when I was working on this project in the 90s in Barcelona. This was done really with an easiness which was absolutely already impossible in Great Britain, in Scotland, and probably is very difficult here also. But in Spain, until not so long ago, it was really a kind of a way of building which was less rigid or less seen as a process, maybe done thinking for the future low court that probably could come. It was really more a process of easiness. So maybe that's why it was possible to do in a kind of easy way, few years, a project, a master plan for the complete old city of Santa Caterina in Barcelona. I think in a way it was a kind of a miracle. We would change all this piece, which was an old market, and we also could change the master plan of this old city, which was kind of staying very, very, very impossible to move since many centuries before. So this was the situation when we started to work on the Santa Caterina market and on the Santa Caterina environment, all the old city. The situation was to be changed, and this piece of market was very important because it had to change the type of life around the old city of Santa Caterina. So this is the result of it, but in fact it is very easy to point the attention on the roof, on the colors, but all this was a strategy in order to make all the rest of the city work better and become really a lively city and not a decadent old piece which was not really going anywhere. So the great work was really about thinking on this situation. We are here, this is Santa Caterina, you see how big it looks compared to the dense city around it, which is a Gothic city. And here there was always a kind of a plan which was never done in the last 100 years. And this made everything kind of uncertain. The plan was there, it was not going to be realized, but the people was not certain that their house would exist anymore. So everything went in a big decay. And we started by the city to think about the place, no? Because we didn't really have a kind of a contract. They just told us, would you like to think about the surroundings of Santa Caterina with no money at all? And we said, yes, of course. And it was really a kind of a familiar way of doing things. And of course, the first drawings, the first sketches were very naive, but also, this is a hand drawing by Eric, but also they were very nice because they were trying to explain how to make a strategy on the old city, not destroying everything, but maintaining parts of the existing and substituting some of the existing buildings, like for example this one drawn in red, with compensating with new construction which would look like the old one and would be adjacent. So this was the tools. These were the tools we were using to do that. We made sketches, and then after the sketches, models, cardboard models, which were really like sketches, and were explaining with wood and cardboard the difference between the old existing buildings and the new one, to get touching it and to be together. So you see that the openings was there was an opening in the wall which was closed and which was not permitting any flow of people, any flow of traffic into the Santa Caterina surroundings. And you see how important it was the market. The market had to be a kind of a point of attraction to this new doorway into the old city of Barcelona. And we were really imagining the roof of Santa Caterina coming out, and a pergola would kind of help to show that there was something new happening, something fantastic which will take place and which will open the city again, no? Because this was a really enclosed and very, very dense piece of city. So this pergola was important, and the roof was also very important. They were a kind of attraction point for the people, also showing that the interior of the market and the exterior were to be considered public space in the same way. So we started to design this roof. As Susan said, it is at the beginning of a project. We are very used to have lines which are not terribly determined. As in the Caltrans project, we had many small models which were just indicating the possibility for the future project. And here we are also in a kind of a moment where the roof is not totally defined, but it is very clear that this roof is a kind of something jumping on top of the perimeter of the Santa Caterina market and making a kind of a new pergola in the middle of the public space, in the middle of the street. So it is really jumping from the inside to the outside, making this difference from inside and outside kind of less important. So this was our aim, to let the market Santa Caterina capture the attention, but also we were very conscious that the inside of the market was absolutely fantastic. I'm Italian, and when I went to Barcelona, I was absolutely fascinated by the beauty of the markets. Markets with fresh fruit and fresh fish and meat and products and people talking to you. And in fact, these markets were traditionally designed to have the specific light which was enough to look at the products and to make the products look very beautiful and very colorful, but not to be too much to deteriorate them. So this beauty of the inside we wanted to transmit in the city, to transmit in the outside. And that's why we started to think that this roof jumping from the building into the public space would also have to be kind of as attractive as the inside of the market. So that's why we started to say, really, fruit and vegetables on top of this roof, and the roof being able to jump out and to show, to be visible from everybody from the other side of the street. But also, Santa Caterina was a market which had a very tough history. In Barcelona, during a certain time, there were a lot of, burnings of the monasteries and churches, because there was a kind of hate towards the church. Because the church was having the biggest places, the monks were having a kind of a very large piece of properties, while the city was absolutely dense and with no air, with no vital space. So there was this kind of violence, and at a certain time it was decided by the state to destroy the churches and the monasteries, some of them, and to let the space for the city. So Santa Caterina market was done with a law like this, and it means that underneath the market there are still ruins of this incredible Gothic church and its courtyards and cloisters, and everything disappeared in order to let the market for the people appear. But then we knew the story, and we knew that the monastery had disappeared. But at a certain moment, when we were going to dig, we found all the footprints of this monastery, and it was a very impressive moment. If you know it on the paper, this is something, but then when you discover everything, it was really impressive and difficult for the city. I think the city was kind of very clever in this moment, and they decided that only a part of it would be conserved, but the most important part would be to let the market work, so having parking underneath, and most of these ruins were removed. But I was very impressed by the presence of the ruins, and we did this photograph. So we did it with a special photographer who is a kind of mystic. I love him because he makes kind of mystic photographs, and these photographs are really special because you have the feeling that you're one of the many buried people here, or just some stones buried here, and suddenly you have the possibility to see the sky and to watch around and to see the city of Barcelona, which has grown during this 600 years or 800 years, which were separating the time of those stones from the reality of 1996 when we were acting. So this was a church. It means that in the old times this was used for burying people, and so we found many skeletons like this. It was kind of impressed, but this was happening very many times in the old city of Barcelona, and the skeletons were mixing with the skeletons of the old building of the old market, which we were renewing. And so it was a very special moment where the old monastery story, the old market story, and the new transformation of the new market was really colliding. They were mingling together, and sometimes I had the feeling that the new material that we were bringing in the place was older and more archaeological than the real archaeology that we were studying and the archaeologists were writing and documenting. So after this big involvement with the lower part of the market, we were going to build this structure of the roof, which I told you was very important because it had to be the kind of the cover of a public space, and give the idea that this big roof was a kind of a kind of a light roof, as if very lightly put on the activity which would take place inside and outside. And also this big structure had to be visible from the rest of the street, so it had to come a little out. And to be able to do this structure, which at the beginning you saw it was very, very undetermined, At the end, we decided to have beams which had pillars only in the outside, and the inside had arches, big arches, which were coming in and out the same roof, and would give the feeling of suspension. So when you are inside, you have no pillars, and so you feel that all the roof on top of you is suspended, and in fact it is, from these three big arches. So this is the moment where the arches were brought on site, and this was a little surprising, let's say. You know, this very, very, very complex structure was actually done physically by artisans. I think Santa Caterina is a project mainly to celebrate the capacity of artisans, which in Barcelona, in this moment of time, were still very present and still very, very able. Small industries, let's say, with people like this one, who was called Joan, who personally didn't really study. He started work at 14 years old, but was incredibly precise in what he was doing. So thanks to his capacity, thanks to his great professionalism, we were able to realize incredibly complex structures with easiness, no? As if it was a normal way of building. You know? So this didn't mean a kind of a big increase in the budget. This didn't mean that the thing was particularly different from another type of building. It just meant that people was doing it with a lot of more attention, but also with a kind of a familiar presence. So I would have loved to show you a video about the moment where these arches were put, but I was not able to find it. So we just rely on the images. And this is the moment where not only the iron arches were put in the roof in Santa Caterina, but also the wooden arches, and the wooden cover was put little by little on top of it. And here we are on top, so you see the arches going in and out from the structure of the roof with the wooden arches. And then the very complex geometry, which is done by a very flexible material, which is wood, thin wood, which is put in many different layers, and on top of the wood, the ceramic, which is so visible, and which was done in very different colors in order to give the impression to be really a piece of fruit or vegetables inside the market, and which was then divided in many different colors and pixels. And here is the third artisan, fantastic artisan, who was working in Santa Caterina. He was also kind of small. He was working with his family, so he had to do the production of the tiles in an incredible way. And at the beginning, he was not sure he could give more than 15 colors. But as you see in this table, he was able to put something like 67. And so it was really a big effort that he did, investigating in different type of colors, so that he could arrive to have this palette, which would really give this impression to have fruit and vegetables on the top of Santa Caterina market. So this is particularly important. He was not able to do a red color in ceramic, but he did a real investigation, and he found in Germany the possibility to do that. It was a very new thing to him. So afterwards we had to realize how to put it in place. We choose to have hexagon as the shape to cover the Santa Caterina very difficult geometry, because the hexagon in nature is the best shape in order to cover a very complex surface. So this probably was an intuition, but it was a correct one. And we also did every color in a kind of a bigger hexagon. So smaller hexagon, we're doing a bigger one, which was able to be brought directly by artisans on top of the roof. and moved and then put together following a kind of a piece of paper where there was the number of the piece and where the builders had no difficulties in putting the piece in the right place. So this was an incredible view. We also had a kind of how do you say, the place where you work under construction on top of a building next to it. So we could look at what was happening on the roof every day, and it was really fantastic. And it was really very special to see how the artisans the builders putting the ceramic on place were nearly like on top of a mountain. They had to put some cords and some things and work as if they were on a topography. And sometimes they really had to fix the ceramic before the glue could fix it with other ways, because otherwise the ceramics would fall down. So here they were working on the edges of the ceramic. On the edges we were doing the kind of Gaudi solutions of making more, of course, not everything is coinciding perfectly, but most of it. This is only the point where the things meet from different distances. And it was really surprising to see that things were working. And this is kind of let's say the suspense that we always have when we do something which was never tried before. No? You think and you hope that things work as you have been studying, but you are very relieved when you see that things in reality are there and work as you were thinking. So it's a kind of this panic that then little by little becomes better when you see that the reality is accepting things and it's becoming exactly what you were thinking. So to do this kind of experiments, I think it is very important to have a lot of good people next to you, giving suggestions, knowledge, their specific knowledge, and so many different knowledge go together in order to arrive to a very complex final product, which of course doesn't depend only from the architects, but depend from many other people involved in the construction. So this was the moment where the roof started to be kind of complete, and then we could see it as a kind of an animal very near to the neighborhood. Actually, this is a kind of a lower building, and the neighborhood are looking on it. So it became a kind of a park, artificial garden, where all the other houses were looking. But surprisingly, while this building was redone, was under construction, all the other houses were repainted, and this was depending from the private, but maybe they had this kind of happiness of seeing that the public space was redone and everything was working better, and so also they wanted to present better their own houses. So this was really a kind of a renewal of a neighborhood, of a piece of architecture, but because it was the renewal of the piece of city. And everybody was feeling this. It was one building which was truly renewed, but everything was getting better thanks to the effort put in this area, public area in Barcelona. So on the back, we built also some social housing, which made the market a little more open. In the past, the market was really a perimeter, totally closed. But now, with this housing entering and these piazzas, this means that the market is more permeable and you can enter it from both sides very easily. And then here is how it looks from the main street. The roof is coming out, so it's very visible, and it's jumping on top of the existing walls and is indicating the new way, the new entry into the neighborhood of Santa Caterina. So this is how it is when you go underneath. Then you have the wood being more present than the ceramic. So from the outside is color, and from the inside is this wood feeling, is this cozy feeling to be underneath a kind of a very protective cover. So this is both images, you know, the ceramic roof on top and the wood inside, with this feeling that inside there is no pillar and there is a continuous space which is very similar to the outside space. So in the outside here is where the housing are, where the new housing, and where the market is really kind of breaking and opening, so that you have very many different openings and the feeling that the city is very much flowing inside and is continuous. It's not interrupted by the presence of the building. We would have loved to have the building open also in the night, but this is not physically possible. So this was the moment where we opened the building. It was 2005, I think, and I was very proud to bring my two kids, because in fact I think their lives are very much in relation with this project. This project is very much near to our own home, our house. We worked on it because it was our neighborhood, and we really liked very much to make our neighborhood better. And my first daughter, she's called Caterina. Her name is the same name of the market. But actually, she was born before, and then we had to work on top of the market. So I always thought she was a little magic in bringing us this very, very necessary work that started very much our working in Barcelona as architects. And then the boy is called Domenic, and this is because the history of the neighborhood has a lot of Caterina and Domenic together, because the monastery was a monastery of Dominicans. So this is a very old-fashioned name, but we decided to give it to our boy, because also we wanted to celebrate the fact that this Santa Caterina market was a kind of project for all the family. So they were not very conscious about that, and maybe one day they will be very happy about knowing that their history is related to the history of this renewal of this space, which is now working very much with a lot of fruit and vegetables inside, as all the markets in Barcelona, and fishes, and a lot of people on Sundays. And this roof, where the arches are working very strongly, giving the feeling that the roof is flying on top of your head. And in fact, of course, there is a big effort to do that. But sometimes when you do the projects, then you have to forget about them, because when you're finished, the project is not belonging to the architect anymore, it's belonging to the city. So we like to go on site, on the place, as spies with a little camera, and to see how people is using the project, how the project is influencing the life of people around it. I think this is very important, especially in this project, because we did it and we designed it thinking about the neighborhood and thinking about making the neighborhood better. And this neighborhood is a very conflicted one, especially it was a very conflicted one. So these big public projects should really make it a little better, the life around it. This is a big effort by the city, but it is done to make the life of people a little better. So, for example, this little history of two kids of different families, of course, becoming friends thanks to the public space, is one of my favorite, which we could get from our spy camera. So I hope this spy camera was just confirming us that we did a good job. I don't know, that we maybe gave a kind of better place for the neighborhood around Santa Caterina. But this was a story which was very different from another story, which could be even longer if I would tell you in details, but maybe would need much more time. It was a story which was going in parallel with the one of Santa Caterina. We did some big projects at the same time, and it was also the same time where Enrique died. Enrique died in year 2000 in the middle of construction of the Santa Caterina market and the Scottish Parliament project. This was the biggest competition we had won until the moment. Eric didn't want to do it because he thought it would be a very, very institutional building, but in fact we did it and we won it. And it was complicated. It was really difficult because we enter in a very different world, in a very different way of doing, and we try to do our best to give to Scotland a place to celebrate their kind of new independence, but also being very clear that this would be a kind of building inside a landscape. We were very, very insisting on the fact that the building shouldn't be a kind of a big celebration, but it should be something like a landscape, a continuous with the beautiful city of Edinburgh, which was the city where the parliament had to be. So a big amphitheater of landscape was the first gesture that we did, and it was kind of making the strength to make the building on top of it. And the building was mingling with the rest of the historical city. We maintained this house, which was part of the Royal Mile, Queensberry House, and the complex is very big, but maintaining this house and making this place for the members of the Scottish Parliament and this place for the meetings rooms and for the big halls, and then the big amphitheater of garden coming from the landscape. This was making the building very, very different. It was comparing with the Queen's Palace. This was the power place, let's say, until the moment. And in this moment, the Scottish Parliament and the Queen's Palace were in front of each other. And then that's why we insisted very much in creating a piazza, a new piazza, which was very not formal, was very easy, was very similar to a landscape between one building and the other. And then this is the important part, the piazza and this big pergola, which is indicating that this building is dedicated to the people mainly. It's dedicated to people to enter inside it. It's very complex, as you see. The geometry we chose was nearly a geometry which was making you lose the idea about what was the most important part of the building. And the construction was very complex as Santa Caterina, but the process was totally different. It was much more determined by the project managers. It was Bobby's Land-Lease organizing all the site, and everything was so completely different. So this is the pergola attracting the people and indicating that this is a project open to everybody, even if it's a parliament which is complicated, you have to have a lot of security and politicians, but everybody in Scotland was very clear about making this building very, very open to the people, and this piazza was really indicating that the public entry was the most important one. Then we used different materials in the facade in order also to make the facade not be too imposing. We used wood and two different types of Scottish stones, and it was very important also to choose the materials because they were insisting very much, choosing from local materials. So sometimes the stones would have been much cheaper to buy them in other places, in South America, in China, but in fact they did the effort to reopen old quarries in order to go and find Scottish material and to give work to Scottish people and to have a kind of pride of having the Scottish Parliament done mainly with Scottish material. So I think this sometimes is a very beautiful theme, sometimes it's a kind of lie. Sometimes it implies sacrifice, for example, sacrifice on the budget in order to have another type of advantage. And I think it was a very interesting experience for me to learn about what all of this means. And the inside of the chamber, of the debating chamber, was really designed to be looking like a boat. We insisted very much on using wood as a fantastic Scottish material, not only because we wanted a very natural, important place for the debating chamber, but also because we thought that this place had to belong to no cities. And of course, the building had to belong to Edinburgh, but when the Scottish people would be inside here, they had to forget that they are in a determined place of Scotland, and they have to feel as if they are in a boat. They are floating in the sea. So that's why the interior of this room was so much reminding wood, and the structure was designed specifically to admit wood as the main material for the beams of the roof and for the furniture around. So it was a very fantastic experience, and it was very strong to arrive to these solutions together with a very different type of organization than the one in Santa Caterina. Sometimes we were accused to be too naive or little professional, but I think it is very important to know a lot about your profession and to know that being professional is not being rigid. It's about being able to control things or to choose the things in the right moment together with the situation. And I think the Scottish Parliament was very important for us in order to understand the difference from the Spanish way of being and maybe the rest of the world. And so with this project we started to open up in the world. I know it was very important. No, in the Caltrans competition we were also kind of offering our way of working. And for example, this is another project in Spain. It's a very big complex. You see, it's a mountain in the north of Spain, in Vigo. And we were asked here to design a new piece of campus in order to put together many of the different faculties which were scattered on top of the mountain. So this was the first sketches. The first sketches were trying to find a kind of one level in the mountain so that this piece of complex could unite the very other faculties around it and could make it a little different from the mountain, because the mountain is very inhabitable, it's very difficult, but this new piece would create a same level, a kind of piazza on the same level, and to do that we had to build buildings inside of the mountains but also outside of the mountains. So the one outside would be kind of suspended and the one inside would be inside the mountain itself. So these are some of the suspended buildings. These are common buildings for all the faculties, so everybody can come here, and this is classrooms for everybody, not only for a determined specific faculty. And this was the moment of construction. You see that it is very suspended, this building. And we had to move very much the earth around it in order to make this piazza possible in this very complicated mountain in Vigo. So you see already the buildings are connecting with bridges, and these are the foundation in order to make the piazza on a certain level. So here is the moment where the piazza is already done. On your right side there is the mountains inside, the building inside the mountains, and on the other one the suspended buildings, which make it possible for everybody in the piazza to look at the landscape and to see the valley, and to have the possibility to understand that they are on top of a mountain even if they have a piazza. So around here we had to make a lot of landscape. The landscape was very important. We had to convince the university to allocate budget in order to make this building possible. And they had the allocated budget only for the buildings, but they didn't do it for the landscape. So we explained that all the complex was like a landscape, the buildings and the stairs and everything. So they had to understand that this was a kind of a completely landscape project, not a series of single buildings. And at the end they understood it. And so our big effort in this sense was to make the complex really belonging to the place and really changing the place so that it was a kind of a new landscape taking place in this piece of mountains. And this landscape is kind of uniting the rest of the buildings on the mountain, trying to create a center for the faculty, a center for the university. So these are the inside of the buildings. And other parts of it, the kind of the end of it, is a big sport hall for everybody, with swimming pools, and the trusses of the sport hall are also kind of flying on top of the street, which is the campus street. So this was a very big project, a very big complex, a lot of parts of it. This was studies we did for the Dean building, the rectorate, and we studied about the beautiful stones that are used in this place in Galicia. So the building was inside the mountain, but the stones used were nearly coming from the same mountains, together with the strong concrete, which were making the facade of the new building. So the university was finished at the end. This new part of the university was finished with this building, and this was all on the same level, and it was then possible to have it as a kind of easy place for meeting and for having all the meeting of the students there. So then, after this many experience in Europe and in Spain, etc., we had a fantastic experience in China. This was coming from Spain because we won the competition for the Spanish pavilion in 2007 for the Expo Shanghai 2010. We thought we wouldn't win it. It was a kind of a competition, kind of institutional, as one of the Scottish Parliament, and we think we are not institutional at all. But sometimes you have surprises, and we were proposing a building which would be very dynamic, a little like Spain, but which was using a material which was very similar in the Spanish tradition and also in the Chinese tradition. So we wanted to use wicker as a facade, and we thought that this would be a very nice idea because wicker is worked by hands, and the language of hands is so similar in Spain and in Asia and everywhere in the world. So we thought it would be a kind of bridge on top of the difficulties of languages. You know? This is the language of hands, which is kind of universal. So we tried to make a building in big scale using this material. And of course it was another big challenge. We were not sure about how to do it, and we have never done it before. As when we did the roof in Santa Caterina, it was a kind of experiment. So in order to be more reassured about making the use of a new material, we thought that the bones of the building could be which is a very complex geometry, as you see, could be in a material which we knew how to work, which is steel. So we had this structure of steel, and on top of the steel there would be this kind of dress, a beautiful dress, which would be done in wicker. So we didn't know how the wicker would be, and we worked in our office in Barcelona, where we have a lot of hands still, because we like very much to work with hands, and we like very much to produce models and to make experiments by ourselves. So on top of the model, of the iron model of the pavilion, of the Spanish pavilion, we started to invent a way of making different dresses. So these were the first shapes for panels to put on top of the iron structure. And at the end we arrived to a definition which we like very much. And so we asked wicker artisans in Spain to realize a one-to-one scale product, so that this could be brought to China and could be reproduced there. And meanwhile, we were also drawing different kind of calligraphies. Of course, it's a kind of very childish calligraphy, but it was very lovely to have the possibility to use the different colors of the wicker in order to make a big calligraphy on the building, on the Spanish pavilion, so that maybe nobody could understand the writings, but the air and the sun and the rain could make it little by little go away, and so these nice writings would become a kind of a good wish for China and for everybody around it. So beautiful things were written on the facade, and we knew that the pavilion was a kind of was very dynamic, but also would be even more dynamic with the presence of people, because a lot of people would go to this building, and then we had to organize it inside in the exhibitions, and then outside, and then inside in the restaurants, or inside in the smaller exhibitions. So it was really about thinking about a flow of people, not breaking the building. And we used the furniture, we designed furniture in order to make this flow possible, and make divisions which were not really visually dividing the continuous space of the Spanish pavilion. So this was to us very important. The material was bamboo. It was not wicker, but was a natural material which was similar to the one of the building. Then construction was a very impressive moment. We liked very much to have these photographs going on, which were also kind of very important, because we were kind of monitoring the building while it was under construction, and seeing what was happening day by day on site. So the geometry is very complex, and we were very afraid that this was not possible to be built in China. But in fact, everything was very precise and very good, even if in China, most of the time, they use this kind of traditional material for the structure and for, how do you say, the scaffolding and everything. So it was very beautiful also to see the scaffolding and And it was also very beautiful to see these moments, which are so similar to the moments in Spain, where people take naps inside the site working. This, of course, wouldn't be possible in Scotland. In the Scottish Parliament, the bobbies wouldn't have admitted someone sleeping there. So I felt a little more at home, let's say. And I felt very happy to see how they were copying the materials that we had sent from Spain. Something like 100 and more artisans were put together during a couple of months in order to produce, instead of producing tools for the countryside, producing these panels which would go in the Spanish pavilion in the expo. They were very proud to do that because in a way it was the first time that their work would be visible, very visible. And so it was a kind of the visit to the Shandong province where they were doing this panels was very happy because the people was very, very happy. Maybe because they were coming from the countryside, or maybe because they were conscious about doing something which would be finally very visible. And here was the material prepared for receiving the panels. You see all the secondary structure is cables which are going to receive the wicker panels. But before receiving the wicker panels, you see that the structure, the secondary structure, was already done in bamboo, and the presence of bamboo was already there. So when the panels arrived on site, it was as if the thing was not totally changing. That look was already there under construction, but then it was becoming more fixed. It was becoming really the dress of the building. So at the beginning it was a kind of a secret. Behind that bamboo structure there would be the wicker dress, but then little by little they started to be visible, to appear, and started to be a presence, a new presence, also for me and for everybody of my staff in Shanghai. So this was, of course, this of being a little afraid of what you have thought and what you have done is something that is very constant. I think it will never go away. Even if you become really, really professional, I think there is always this kind of fear about the final result. And this building was really looking like an animal when it first appeared with this wicker dress on wicker skin, and it was really alive. It was a kind of an alive animal, and we didn't know how the Chinese people would think about that. In fact, they started to appreciate it, and I don't know why. Maybe because they thought that this material was very much coming from their tradition or from their countryside, and it was used now in a kind of a very different way, in a kind of high, low-tech way. So this was the piazza of the Spanish pavilion, which was a kind of the belly, making everybody coming in and distribute into the building, and the rest of the building was looking like this, like this strange kind of soft shape. So the inside was kind of very beautiful because the light was really coming through this double skin of wicker. And you had a feeling sometimes in this very artificial land, which was Expo Shanghai 2010, to be inside of a wood, inside of a natural space where the inside would change depending from the sun and from the light, but you always had this kind of feeling of being through different leaves. So the space was very much continuous, and sometimes in the building there was this feeling that It was an uninterrupted space, and the exhibition was taking place in this building. And sometimes it was really not destroying the building, because as you know, in an expo, it is very easy to have a kind of videos and film and this type of thing, so you don't see the building. But for example, here the artist decided to show, instead of a big film, she's a filmmaker actually, but she decided to create a very, very big baby, which was representing the future of Spain. And in fact, this baby was adored by Chinese people. And yes, they were going here and started to make photographs and things like that. Much better than any other 3D films, which was done in any other place in the expo. And this was the first thing which was bought for the Expo Museum, and the other thing which was bought is the pavilion itself, but it's a little more difficult because now we have to find a promoter who is going to maintain it and transform it into something different than a Spanish pavilion for the Expo. So in the night, the building was looking like a Chinese lamp, because this was possible through the two skins of the two layers of wickers, and the simple light behind was just becoming the color of the wicker itself, and everything was becoming like the color of gold. Very, very, very special. So because of this work, we were called in another place in China to make another small building for this painter who was called Zhanda Chen. In fact, he is a very famous painter, and I met with this Sam yesterday because he was living in San Francisco for a long time. He flew from China in '49 and then went in Brazil, San Francisco, and finally in Taiwan. But now they are very keen to remember him, and in the place where he was born, Neijian, they would like us to do a kind of a museum to remind the fact that he was born there. He was a very fantastic painter. He had an incredible technique, and he was able to reproduce paintings of different Chinese epochs. One day he met Pablo Picasso, and that's why they called us, because we are Spanish, and they thought that this could be a kind of a good reminder of this moment. And when they met together, of course, they did a photograph, and Picasso was making kind of jokes. And he did, with the brushes that were given to him by Zhanda Chen, fantastic Chinese brushes, he did a portrait of Zhanda Chen himself, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And apparently the wife of Zhanda Chen commented in Chinese, "Oh, this is really horrible." And Pablo Picasso didn't understand, and so he gave it to them, thinking that this was a kind of something that they liked. So this remained as a reminder of that special moment. And we decided that our building, which is on top of a very nice hill in Neijian, which is the town where Zhanda Chen was born, we would do it as a kind of a footprint of a series of pavilions which would go around an old tea house which we wanted to maintain. So the elevation of the pavilions would come from profiles of paintings of Zhanda Chen himself. So very strange profiles are making these pavilions, which are mingling then with the trees of the surrounding, and which are not disturbing the presence of nature, because you can have nature inside and outside. And actually we wanted these pavilions to be able to look inside at some of the well, they don't have any collection. This is one of the main points. So we don't know what they can look inside. We have to invent what they look inside. But also from the pavilions you can look outside and then see a garden, and maybe a garden designed in the way of Zhanda Chen. Zhanda Chen was a fantastic painter, but also he was a gardener. He was building his own gardens in his houses. Also, he was a fantastic cook. He was inventing different recipes every time he would have had guests. And his son was telling me yesterday that every time he would have guests, he would write with his fantastic calligraphy the menu of the night. But then he doesn't have them anymore. Maybe some of the guests have it around, but it's not there. So this is the scheme around the tea house, a series of pavilions, and then you can look inside of the garden or outside at the woods. The tea house is becoming the kind of entry for the museum, and then you have really a kind of corridor around from which you can go from one pavilion to the other easily, and you see that part of it is glass and other parts is not glass. So you have these visions outside and inside. And the structure is bamboo structure, compressed bamboo, and we are now struggling because this would be possible due to the very difficult regulations in China. So this is the possibility for the inside of the pavilions, and this is the moment where they do the celebration of the first stone in Neijang. So you see that they like very much to celebrate, and they have fantastic colors, and I think it's very beautiful. No, we are learning very much from this importance given to celebration, given to special moments, and also given to beautiful colors. And this project, as I was telling you, was also to me a kind of very special project because of the situation. Zhanda Chen flew away from China and never came back from 1949. He had many children, and his children were living in other places which were not China. And in this moment, the delegation from politicians from Neijang was coming to Madrid, and the youngest daughter of Zhanda Chen, Sing, she married a Madrid businessman, and I think they met here in Berkeley. So, so on that day, it was possible in Madrid to put together the Neijang people, the politicians coming from the place where their father was born, and the younger daughter of Zhanda Chen and his husband. And I think it was a very beautiful moment, and it was a thank to this project. And so this is the moment where the politicians and the family of Zhanda Chen are together again, and maybe this would bring a kind of a good different project in relation to this fantastic painter. And here is my collaborator, absolutely terrified by the fact that these politicians always make you drink and drink and drink, and he couldn't drink anymore. So I don't know now. I think I used a lot of time. So maybe very quickly we can give a look to some of the projects we are doing now. Now in China, after this experience, we have an office, and we are doing many projects, but the most important one is a competition we won, always thinking that we wouldn't win it. It's for the University of Fudan, the management university. They want to make a new campus in a new urban piece of city of Shanghai, and this will be in 3 different blocks. These were the first images we were giving them for the university. We were conscious that the university would be in a city, but it would be very important to have the city participating to this new university. It wouldn't be a closed university, but on the ground floor would be really open, so that it would be a flow of students, but also of normal citizens going through different doors, so that the urban block would not be closed, and kind of a roof would cover everybody, students and normal people and city, so that these roofs were the first ideas that we had for this university. This roof sometimes is on top of the interior space and sometimes is on top of the exterior space. We thought that these three blocks had to be united so that this flower pavimentation was kind of saying it would be like a campus even if we are in the city. It would be like a garden, so these blocks would be kind of in a continuous space, and you have the feeling that it is really very possible to go inside and outside, and there is no private space on the lower floor, but then on the upper floor, yes, you have the university, so this is more private, more segregated, and you have other public spaces on a top level. So this was appreciated, and then we won the competition, of course, always unexpectedly. And now we are developing this campus together with the Dean of Fudan, knowing that these three blocks have to look like the same, because everybody has to understand that this is a unique building, one unique building, and they are connected through bridges, so that you have a continuity of these different blocks, and also continuity of the facade, which is in ceramic. And the roof is going on top of the public spaces on the outside, and you have this continuity of the doors, which are letting people going through the interior of the urban blocks. And the roofs on the inside will determine this kind of open spaces, which I think are very, very useful in a university, very important, because you have not a specific class, and you are together with other people, and you have a fantastic way of teaching, of learning, which is a little different from the way of learning from the closed classroom, where you can really have another type of information given. We did another university project in a competition project. This one we didn't win. It was for Milan, and we did a lot of collage. No? This is Bocconi in Milan. You might know it. It is also a management university, so we were very impressed by the fact that we were working in two management universities at the same time. And at the beginning, we really were playing with this collage, trying to arrive to a story more than a project at the very beginning. And the story was a story of Milan, the story of the family Bocconi, the story of the university. And then with this collage, we did the first scheme, which was putting together the old campus, which is here, the existing campus, and the new one that they want to design, with a kind of a big entry underneath a canopy here, and a kind of another connection with the park here, so that the inside, the heart of the campus would be a green heart. And on top of this, we did a lot of models, a lot of cardboard schemes, and then the cardboard schemes became more solid models, and then these drawings for the presentations, which are indicating a campus which is very dense and which is taking part of the city, and is also very similarly to Fudan, giving part of their infrastructure to the city itself. So a big canopy is welcoming the students. The canopy is a special structure which we studied very well. So this was the public space, and well, the university was very, very complex. And then, I don't know, I think we have too many projects to see. This is another competition, so we go fast. We don't look at it. It's a high-speed train between France and Italy. And as you have seen, we work very much with collage before arriving to a kind of final scheme, which at the end was this one. No? This you reusing the infrastructure existing, the bridge to make these vaults, which will be the new station for high-speed train in Val di Susa. So this was not a successful competition. We were second, which is many times a possibility. And we were more lucky in this other competition, which we did in the same time, which is in Ferrara, which is a beautiful, beautiful city in Italy. And in Ferrara, the church decided to make a new church in a very forgotten place, because they wanted to also give more life to this kind of forgotten neighborhood. And we were looking at Ferrara before making any decision about the building. And then from the photographs we took from the city, we started to make collage, and we started to work also together with a painter, with an artist who has to participate in the church. And we were thinking that Ferrara is a very solid type of city, but in those days they had earthquakes, very unusual earthquakes situations. And so we thought that it would be nice to make a very light structure instead of imitating a kind of a very brick, solid looking church. So sometimes in Ferrara you have this beautiful balloon festival happening, and we decided that our building would be more similar to a balloon, or more similar to a kind of bamboo structure. And so we started to work with this idea that the church would be a kind of a big roof, very, very light on top of the people going to the church. So these were the very many things we designed, and until the end we were not very sure about the real shape of our project. You know, you have a lot of things cut on top of your table, and until the very end you don't take a decision about how the building will look. But at the very end we decided something. We made thousands of little things, but they were arriving to a kind of a scheme, which was this one. And more or less this is what we presented to the church, because this is a competition from the Church of Rome. And so we thought maybe this is a good competition because the client is a solid client. But nevertheless we did a kind of a very light structure. We forgot to put the cross, in fact. We didn't. But they forgave us, and we won the competition anyway. And we thought that the cross anyway is inside the roof of the church. So now we have the duty to develop this building, and it will be very nice to develop it in a kind of a light way. I think I put too many projects in this conference. I think maybe it's the time is finished. So. Sorry?
Do you have the structural engineer you work with all the time?
Yes. I try to work with him all the time. Sometimes I can, sometimes I cannot. For example, in China, most of the time I cannot, because they don't give me the budget to employ a structural engineer from my side. But most of the time I work with someone who is very capable, very good in Spain. He's now 75 or something like that, and he's belonging to a different generation, but he's a fantastic structural engineer who is able to tell you the size of structure more or less by eyes. So it's really a fantastic experience to work with him.
In 2008, we made the pilgrimage to see the archery range that your firm designed. And as you said, at some point the project becomes owned by the city and its people, and not the architect. And certainly there's not a lot of possession by people in the neighborhood who play soccer there now. But I wondered if you've been to it, if you have any reaction, and also if you have any recollection of what it meant to your firm at the time to get that project.
I remember archery range. It was a very nice commission, and it was maybe part of this story of building directly with the builders, let's say, because this was a very complex building. The geometry was so complex that it was nearly impossible to draw it with the possibility of the time, which was 1991. And then it was very nice to see, for example, Enrique going on site and saying, oh, this is very complex. So you have to put the two surfaces together, trying to fill the gap, and more or less you can do it. And this was done. This was done, and it was really fantastic. But then the sad thing is that the city was not able to reuse those buildings. So now they are in a total decay. One was destroyed because of the metro station, the metro line had to go underneath, and the other one was cut and badly used by everybody. But now we have a foundation which is newly opened, which is named after Enrique Miralles. So it's Enrique Miralles Foundation, and we hope that we will be able, little by little, to do something to restore the building built by Enrique.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you strive to use local craftspeople in your projects?
Sorry?
Do you try to use local craftspeople in all your projects?
I try. I would love to be able to do it. Now it's not so easy to do it at the great distances. For example, in China or things like that. But even when I work in China, for example, now I'm consulting with a ceramic artisan, which I'm very confident with, the one of Santa Caterina, in order to give advices for the production in China. So I still try to have a very strong connection with artisans in Spain. And also we did a structure in the BAM for Merce Cunningham Dance Company. And this was done by an artisan very near Barcelona. So I like very much to work with artisans, yes.
We're going to solve the rest of it over some wine. Would that be okay? Thank you very,
Fantastic.
very much.